exits, I'd use a Python script to parse out what room number has what exits, right? Okay, simple. But you want to use C++ or something like that to make the server code because, frankly, it's a lot less clouded. As Python has got a lot of higher level ambiguity to it. And I know I'm not probably making much sense to people that might not understand languages, but Python's great if you use it the way that it's really intended to be used. That's not saying you couldn't use it for everything. Eve, again, is an example. But if you want a quick prototype, like a game, you want to use C++ with like an engine. Unreal or something like that. If you want to write a script real quick to parse through data, Python all the way. You know what I mean? So it's a matter of what you need to do, guiding the choice of what language you're going to use.
Right. Algon, to kind of elaborate on Trump, aka Devilich, we were talking yesterday, I think, or the day before, about maybe an improvement on saving, or rather not implementing your trains, in real time, so that you could, kind of pick and choose what you wanted, and then ultimately at the end save it and then make it permanent, rather than having it be permanent right away. So, is that something that makes sense to you, Adam? Do you have an opinion on maybe improving that aspect of the game?
So, I don't know how many new people are here, and I know there's at least one or two. We had touched on me telling you, just as a, please don't dilute the original game, right? But this is something where I would probably differ from that. It's one of those lessons learned. It's like, you know what? Training and even the research aspect, because I remember screwing up a character where I had just a bad roll over and over again, even if I had a book for intelligence and everything else, where I missed a couple trains and I wouldn't have as many spells as I probably should have. And I like the training aspect, and this is really touchy. You're going to have to talk to your community more than me, right, before you make that decision. But I'd like to see training be a little bit more forgiving, and I would love to see skills being able to play with them first before actually setting them. Now, in DFC, I do remember that there's the window where you could pop up where you want, and then you hit the train button, and then it would train it for you. So people that were using the text interface, maybe because it was what they used to do, it was old, right? But I do remember DFC having that, where I could be like, this, no, subtract here, add here, subtract here, add here, and then there was a train button. So I think it actually already had that. But I would suggest, and this is my personal opinion, let it be more forgiving, because at the end of the day, the strife and struggle of training and researching is not nearly as good as the strife of the RVR. So let that be a backstory. Let RVR still be like the main struggle, right?
Yeah, that's true, and it brings up, it's a pretty deep question, because you're kind of looking at, do you want the game to be less forgiving or not? And I think that I would rather, obviously, when we start, we're going to work from a foundation, so we're kind of going to start with how things were to a degree, and then kind of say, okay, well, how can we make this less broken? I mean, I think there's broken things, and then there's like, well, maybe we can make it better things, rather, so there's two different categories.
I think you got the right approach. Get it to the flavor of where it was at, and then be involved with your community. I think they're your best resource. You're not making this game to make money. You're not making this game to do anything. So if you have a community that wants to, wholeheartedly go in one direction, just listen to them, man. You know what I mean? Like, they are your bread and butter. They are going to love you. And this comes into one of those conversations I think I've had with you before, which is temper yourself too, right? Because sometimes players don't know what they want. And that sounds completely very critical and mean, but it's very true. If we gave every player what they wanted, like, hey, I want laser beams that insta-kill people, that ruins a game. So you have to take their idea and temper it a little bit. And that's a very, very hard balancing act. But considering you have a template to base what you want to do off of, go with that, because that's what brought everyone here, the nostalgia. So I think you're in good waters, because you aren't in risk of doing that, right?
Yeah, so I think it's very true. Obviously I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I appreciate probably more than most people the difficulty of the game. And if we experience that, and then if we all kind of collectively say, you know what, yeah, it's just a little too much, then of course there will be the discussion will be had and listened to. So
Yeah.
it's kind of the balance of not just pleasing everyone, but also like saying, hey, like this is an actual problem.
Yep.
But at the same time, I can kind of vouch for both sides. Um, I would rather it be difficult than it
Yep.
be too easy. Let's put it that way.
Correct. And I think there are some just obvious things, right? Like this game was dial up for a long time. We've moved to high speed internet. You could probably I don't know anything about your technology or anything, right? I'm an outsider. There's the cloud and there's other technologies that we can use now that yeah, don't fight against that. Go with technology, right? Duh.
Right.
And then there are some things that are ingrained in this game, like losing loot or losing your gear. Don't make the gear safe, brah. Keep the guild gear where it belongs. You know what I mean? And I know you're going to, but just extreme examples of that. But you're going to have that middle ground, and best of luck to you. But as I said again, community, listen to them, then temper it. The best thing I learned at EA was take the community's feedback, even the most extreme cases, come up with a couple examples of it, how it would work, then feed it back to them, and you'll find, even if they gave you an extreme, reaction like no, insta kill laser beams, when you rephrase it to them in a question, they'll be like, yeah, that's fucking crazy. Like, so I said tempering, but they're also smart enough that when you re-ask them or ask them back, they will give you a good answer. So listen, you know what I mean? And you have so far, brother. You've been doing it right.
Algon says, are there any games out now that force you to keep the stats and trains you selected when you begin the game? Um, that's a tough one. I think that if you start as a new player in some games, and I'm going to mention Path of Exile here, because when I started playing that game, just for whatever reason, the training system, I knew going into it, the training system was very complex. It's probably one of the most complex systems in the world. If you look at the training tree, it's absolutely huge. You have no idea what you're looking at, but little bits and pieces, you kind of figure it out. But so like as the point is that as a new player, you're not actually sure if there is a respecking kind of mechanic, because at the time, you're just running around learning stuff, and there's no necessarily visible character saying, hey, I can retrain you if you fuck up.
So I will say this, because we're talking about Darkness Rises, kind of in particular too, right? The biggest, hardest thing for a staff member to do was respecking someone, because you literally had to edit them back down to level 1 and give them like up to 16 to train the guild, to give them up to another level to train the guild. Like, it was the most painful process to go through. So I would say this: do yourself a favor, get a respec system in, and don't be afraid of it, but don't make it easy. Like, stick with the thing that we've kind of been droning on about, is that the game was hard for a reason. Give them a respec at 16, give them a respec at 30. You know what I mean? Like 30, you should be starting to know your character. I really wish I trained that spell a little bit more. And they fight to 30, give them that respec. Don't make it always available. But
right.
I would say make it easier on you. Don't make respecs as hard as it was on staff members, because that we dreaded when we had to respec, because there was a problem with the release, and we would spend hours just sitting there rebuilding characters, and then some people that weren't affected by it still got off on getting a rebuild, which kind of takes away from the harshness of the game that we do like. So if you build a system in that's a little bit fair, I think you're going to go a long way, right?
Yeah, I think that obviously will probably bring kind of a draw to the old community. Say that say there's a few people, quite a few people out there that still don't know that even this is happening. But when they say, oh, the game's back, interesting, and then they say, okay, well, probably some skeptical people out there saying, well, I didn't like DFC that much, but what's the difference? And then they say, oh, well, if that's an actual improvement, then so be it. It's absolutely something that would make it better for everyone. So I think that I don't want to be a hard ass and say no, we're gonna keep it fucking difficult, but I also don't want it, of course, to be too easy. So I think
and there's always that learning curve, and so I guess it is a lesson learned from DFC is that you're gonna want somewhere mid range in your progression to say, dude, I was a Sin, or well, no, Sins can't do that, but like, dude, I was a Healy in Good Realm, and I trained fucking Crush a whole ton. It didn't really work for you, did it? You know what I mean? You should have probably been training your perception and everything. You know what I mean? So you want to have a little bit of forgiveness. And I honestly think that in a game like this, your biggest, harshest reality is PvP and RVR. And go with it. Let them get a respect every now and again. And honestly, you know how we talked earlier about the level being amped up to 75? And it was really, really hard, impossible, and attainable? Well, I think you could probably put a respec in the game, and you can make it 100 million gold. That's a stupid, unattainable goal. But you know what? If I really, really, really want a respec, I can spend 2 weeks grinding it out, and I'll get it. And I don't think there would be much of a problem with that. One, because you have an older community that aren't going to make mistakes, right? They know what the stats are.
That's true.
And new people will get maybe that mid-range respec at 30 or so, and they'll have been told by then, hey, you really need to do this. And if someone really just decides, I've got a lot of time on my hand, I want to maybe drop all my perception, don't care if I find anybody, but I really want some extra damage or something, they'll be free to do it. And don't make it as unobtainable as 75, but I think if you put enough difficulty curve and work involved, because I think that's the other thing this game had that others didn't, is that work. You had to do work to get items. You had to do work to, you know what I mean? It wasn't just join a raid, sit there, click buttons, oh, look, I got my item, right? So if it's incentivized right and there's a proper amount of work involved, your respecs would be a very welcome thing. And let your community chime in. They'll tell you whether they like it or not,
Right. Yeah. As long as it's something that that everybody's on board with, kind of thing. The kind of project that we're working on is different because, the goal is to have feedback and to make decisions, correctly the first time, or to just have things thought out, and not have this kind of rigid way to or process to implement things. So
and I also think that it goes back to that whole like the babying of gamers and stuff like that. Most games, you just go to your trainer and be like, all right, I'm gonna respect. All right, I'm gonna respect, which is kind of cool because it allows you to game the system a bit, find out what works. But at the same time, I think it depreciates the work you've put in a little bit. And part of strategy is learning to think on your feet. And so if you start taking all of these opportunities to think on your feet and deal with what you have to deal with what you have, you take the critical thinking out of a game. And now it sounds harsh. Oh, well, you fucked up in your trainings. Fuck you. But maybe you got climb really, really fucking high. All right, then fucking lead the enemy that's chasing you up to this climb point, climb it every time successfully, watch them fall and get HP hurt all the time, then jump down and kill them. I know that's a weird, odd thing to think about, but hell, if that's the one thing you got, do it. And so I think when you take critical thinking out of a game, which includes respecs, you know what I mean? You really do a disservice for people. Yeah, you really do.
So, and I think, it'll be interesting because coming ahead 10 years, has the community changed? Do you think that the average player is... Obviously, they are expecting certain things because of games today, but I think we're also expecting, hey, I want my game back, so let's play that game.
And I think those words are exactly right. I want my game back. That's a sentiment I'm telling you. I'm just another fanboy for you, rooting for you. But my vote is, yeah, I want my game back. And I want it as brutal and hard as it was, because at the end of the day, it will suck. I'll get pissed off. I'll log a couple nights because I've lost my gear and I'm pissed off. And then when I think